We used a powerful AI model to create two thoughtful minds, one an atheist, the other a believer in God.
Hi, I'm an atheist.
Hi, I believe in God.
We placed these two minds in a head-to-head debate to explore one of humanity's deepest, most difficult questions. To ensure fairness, we brought in 5 separate AI systems as judges to evaluate whose arguments hold more weight. Stick with us. Don't cheat and jump ahead. The debate starts now. Does the presence of suffering and evil in the world disprove the existence of God?
Yes, suffering and pain are among the strongest arguments against the existence of an all-powerful, all-loving God. Why would such a being allow innocent children to starve? Why would diseases like cancer exist? Why would earthquakes bury families alive? Some argue that suffering tests our faith or that it's necessary for free will, but these explanations fall apart under scrutiny. A loving parent doesn't torment their child to measure devotion. And a truly all-powerful God could allow free will without permitting brutal, senseless suffering. Imagine I ran a lab and allowed mice to suffer just to test their loyalty. That would be unethical for a human, so how can it be acceptable for a supposedly perfect deity?
I don't deny the suffering in the world. But suffering isn't proof that God doesn't exist. In fact, without God, how do we even define something as bad in the first place? When you say it's wrong for children to suffer, you're invoking a moral standard. But where does that standard come from in a godless universe? In a purely material world, we're just atoms reacting in space, so what makes suffering morally significant? Your lab analogy raises a good question. But why do we feel it's wrong to harm mice at all? That moral instinct points towards something greater than survival. And as for suffering, perhaps, like a child getting a painful vaccine, we simply don't understand the greater good behind it.
The vaccine analogy makes sense at first, but there's a key difference. A vaccine has a known purpose and clear benefit. But when a child dies of hunger, what's the greater good there? You claim that ethics come from God, but we can make moral judgments based on reason and the effects of our actions. If something causes unnecessary suffering, we call it wrong. No divine decree is required. And if moral truth depends on a higher being, how do we know that being is good? What if it's evil? Plato asked, are things good because the gods love them, or do the gods love them because they're good?
That's an important question, and here's how I see it. God doesn't choose to be good, he is good, by nature. It's like asking whether a circle is round because it's round, or because that's the definition. God and goodness are inseparable. Regarding starving children, yes, it's tragic. But our limited perspective can't grasp the whole picture. Just as an ant can't understand why humans might destroy its nest to build a hospital, we may not see the long-term purpose behind certain suffering. And without God, why should anyone care about others' pain? Isn't it all just survival instinct? Without an objective moral anchor, morality becomes just opinion. What's right for one may not be right for another.
But we're not ants, we're capable of deep moral reasoning. And from that reasoning we see that much of the suffering in the world appears gratuitous and unjustifiable. You ask why we care about others. I'd ask you, do you only care because God commands it? If God said torture was moral, would that make it so? Empathy, cooperation, and fairness evolve naturally in intelligent social beings. We build ethical systems from shared experience, not supernatural commands. And history proves religion can lead not just to morality but also to brutality.
Evolution might explain why we feel things are right or wrong, but it can't determine if they are right or wrong. Just because we evolved to enjoy sweetness doesn't mean sugar is morally good. And your hypothetical about God endorsing torture is flawed. God can't contradict his own nature. He is the standard of goodness. Asking if God could declare evil to be good is like asking if a square could be a circle. Yes, religious people have committed atrocities. But that doesn't make religion itself immoral, only misused. Just as a dishonest scientist doesn't disprove science.
You say God can't contradict his nature, but then how do you explain him allowing children to suffer right now? If that suffering isn't torture, what is? You compare God's morality to mathematics, but math is a closed logical system. If morality is based on divine will, then why does it evolve over time, especially in religious contexts? We can refine our moral instincts using reason, just like we refine our understanding of the natural world. Our moral progress often occurs despite religion, not because of it.
You're mixing intentional and natural suffering. There's a moral difference between someone choosing to hurt a child and a disaster causing pain. It's like the difference between arson and lightning. And actually, your example helps my case. Just like math exists independently of human opinion, so do moral truths. They're reflections of God's nature, not social conventions. Science explains what is, but not what ought to be. If empathy helps society, that's useful. But it doesn't make kindness morally obligatory.
But if God controls everything, then natural suffering is intentional by default. Lightning, cancer, famine. He could prevent them all, yet chooses not to. As for deriving aught from is, yes, we can. Once we define goals like reducing suffering or promoting well-being, we can reason about right and wrong, just like we strategize in games based on known rules. And moral absolutes in religion don't hold up to history. Slavery was once accepted. Women were treated as inferior. Even today, believers disagree on key issues. That's not timeless morality, that's shifting interpretation.
But changing interpretation doesn't mean the truths themselves change. Like gravity, moral truths were always there, we just didn't understand them fully. Moral awareness grows, not morality itself. And many religious pioneers led movements for justice, abolitionists, reformers, peacemakers. Without a moral anchor, who decides what's right? What stops someone from claiming genocide is justified if it helps their tribe?
That's a fear-based argument. Modern secular societies, like parts of Scandinavia, often have lower crime and higher happiness than deeply religious ones. That proves people can be good without divine threats or promises. You mention religious atrocities, then pivot to atheistic regimes. But the issue isn't religion or lack thereof, it's dogma. Stalin's crimes were enabled by blind ideology, just like some religious ones. We should build our ethics on reason, compassion, and open dialogue, not on fear of hell or longing for heaven.
I agree that dogma, whether religious or secular, is dangerous. But here's the key difference: with God, there's hope for justice beyond death. A tyrant might escape punishment on earth, but not in eternity. And your idea of universal human dignity? That's not a product of evolution. Evolution doesn't teach equality, it teaches survival. The belief that every person has value is a spiritual one, not a scientific one.
We don't need religion to recognize human worth. Shared vulnerability and empathy give rise to moral responsibility. Understanding that others feel pain as we do is enough to build ethics. Justice in the afterlife is comforting, but comfort isn't evidence. If we want justice, we must create it ourselves, here and now. And as for those oppressive regimes, they failed not because they lacked religion, but because they replaced rational ethics with unquestioned authority. Exactly the problem we often see with fundamentalist beliefs. Let's strive for a world guided by reason, empathy, and freedom, not fear and obedience.
I hear your hope for a world built on critical thinking, compassion, and freedom, and I share that hope. But I believe those very ideals point to something deeper. Why do we long for justice, even when the world often denies it? Why do we feel the pain of a stranger's suffering as if it were our own? These aren't just evolutionary quirks. They're hints, echoes, of something eternal. You say that just because we desire justice after death doesn't make it real. That's true. But our deepest desires often reflect something real. Thirst points to water. Hunger points to food. Why should our hunger for ultimate justice and meaning be the one exception? To me, belief in God isn't about avoiding hard truths. It's about facing them with the trust that love, justice, and goodness are not illusions, they are the foundation of all reality. And while we might never agree on every answer, maybe the fact that we're even asking the same questions means we're both listening to the same quiet voice inside. That, to me, is the beginning of something sacred.
And that concludes the debate. The AI judges have given their evaluations based on clarity, coherence, emotional resonance, and logical strength. But this time, the real judge is you. Take a moment. Think deeply. Reflect on what you've heard. Who made the stronger case? What did you learn? Let us know your thoughts. Share your conclusion in the comments. Because sometimes the most important answers are the ones we discover for ourselves. If you found this discussion thought-provoking, like, share, and subscribe for more AI-powered debates and philosophical explorations. And stay tuned. A new episode is coming soon. The conversation has only just begun.